Well, Jeff, today we're on the second principle, second video.
Ooh.
All right. This principle is about limbic brains harmonize, limbic resonance, and how emotions are catchy. And when we walk into families, we always know if they're positively following this principle or if it's being enacted negatively in the family. So,
I mean, even just the idea, is the family even aware that when one of their family members feels afraid or turns it into anger, that it's going to affect the rest of the family? Or sometimes they have shoulds. It shouldn't affect us that much.
yeah, the kids will never know that I'm upset.
Yeah,
I
they'll
love
never
that
know
one.
I didn't say anything.
No. How would she know I'm scared about this, that, or something else?
Right.
Yeah.
That pretty much tells us that this principle is being ignored for the most part. It's still functioning. Again, that's the nature of all the principles. It's still functioning within the family system, but it's being ignored by the executive functions.
Yeah, it just plays out without intention.
Yep.
Yeah. So we've identified 5 different ways that we've recognized it when we've walked into families. And the first one, you get that vibe when you walk in, how they're just overly controlling. And parents are like, well, I need to make my kids obey, or I need this, or I need to do that. They have some kind of justification for their over controlling the environment without acknowledging if these things happen, we're going to have emotions that are generated. So to prevent those emotions from being generated, they have so many restrictions going on.
Yeah, that's the one I see. They anticipate fear, usually fear and sadness. They anticipate that in a family member, and then they try very strongly, sometimes intentionally and powerfully, to manipulate the environment in such a way to remove that trigger, so that the individual doesn't feel sad and scared, so that the system doesn't feel sad and scared. One of the ways I've seen parents of traumatized children utilize this principle negatively is they'll say, well, I would like to tell them that we're going to go to the park tomorrow, but I'm afraid of the fear it's going to generate, and if something happens and we can't, then I'm afraid of behavior, so I'm not going to tell them.
Right. Wow.
So they restrict the flow of information.
They do. It just sends me back thinking about one family saying, oh, we can't let our daughter ride the school bus because you know what kind of bad things that could happen on the school bus. I mean, she could get bullied or nobody may sit with her and all this stuff. So we'll just continue taking her to school. Instead of being able to help their daughter manage whatever could go on in a school bus, they just stopped it. And in my mind, I'm thinking, all right, so when she's 23 and she needs to go to work, you're going to be driving her back and forth all the time.
And you describe one of the words you use for this one, this particular symptom, is compulsive. They don't even realize how much energy or time and effort they're making to over control the environment, to see that scared and sad things don't happen.
They have that in their head, the shoulds. I have to, but I have to do that.
Now, the second thing that we notice is a very restricted range of emotions within the family. It's always amazing to me how the more you try to restrict feelings of sad and scared, how even feelings of happy or experiences of happy start to become minimized in a very parallel process.
Yeah.
And so when we ask them, when's the last really happy thing that's going on? Well, we don't have really happy things. And, when's the last sad and scared things? Well, nothing. We keep things we don't have sad and scared.
Yes, and that particular family sticks in my head on that piece when we start the process of kind of breaking that loose so that they can have experiences. They were terrified to even try to go do happy.
Yeah.
It was hard.
Well, the weird thing about happy, the reason I think it parallels is when you find a happy in your life. Let's say I like to drink tea. At the same time you recognize that and you say to yourself, I really like to drink tea, there's another part of you that now feels afraid that you're not going to get the thing you like. So it seems to me, as I've worked with families over the years, that's how, like, even the positive emotions end up getting limited because you just don't seek them out because they're immediately squelched by the counter part of yourself that becomes afraid of not getting it.
Especially when you have traumatized kids in your home, so many times they did lose those things. As soon as they expressed that they liked this or that, that became the form of punishment for them by taking those away.
Plus the traumatized kids. I mean, especially when you talk foster and adopt, you know these children have lost the very first relationship they had in life, or it's been disrupted horribly. So, I mean, for them, it's almost automatic in their thought processes. As soon as I find something I like, it'll be taken away from me.
Right.
And sometimes they don't even know they're having that thought process. It's just, it all happens limbically in the emotional part of the brain.
I always think of that as their template, that they have this template. So with that, I always think of flat affect as number 2, but then number 3 are those, the families whose emotions are volatile, you know?
I'm going to use an example of my own family here, which they will probably not like. But, there was a time when my one son would hit my other son, and the son that was hit would yell, and then my wife would immediately, yell and scream and tell him to stop, and then the dog would start to bark.
Right.
And if I wasn't careful, I would join right in and I would start yelling. And afterwards, when I would look at the process, I would realize this all happened so fast. There was no control over the flow of that harmonization.
Right.
Limbic brains harmonized. There was no flow. It was just one moment we were happy, and then something happened to scared and sad.
Right.
It just went through everybody. And then we'd be yelling at each other for sometimes 20 to 30 minutes afterwards. And when we recognize this in families, how the entire family's emotional mood can change so quickly.
I always think of when a couple has an argument and then you say, okay, so what was the fight about? They look at you like, I don't even remember. So number 4, I think, stands out, and we're going to spend more time with this one later on, is when there's a member in your family that can't harmonize. That's hard, because this is a principle that's limbic brains harmonize. But then there's this exception for a child with trauma or someone with trauma.
But it's not an exception, is it?
Well, explain that piece, because it's what it feels like.
Yeah. The child, of course, because of their trauma, because of their internal working model of I'm bad, caregivers are bad, the world is a bad place, they learn very quickly not to share the emotions of a primary caregiver, because historically for them that primary caregiver was probably a little dysregulated and unable to make that connection for some reason.
I'm gonna stop you on that and say, not always just a little dysregulated. Sometimes they were extremely dangerous, or the addictions were so overwhelming that they totally checked out. The spectrum was so broad with that.
Now, where this becomes problematic, of course, is the principle the second principle, the limbic brains harmonize. That is still going to work. Now, what that means is if the child is unable to come to where the parent is in the harmonization process, then what ends up happening is the parents eventually start coming to the child. So we talk about the pump working. When we bring a child into our family system, where the assumption is that child is feeling sad and scared over the events of their lives. And our goal is that the joys and the happies of our life will begin to leak into that child, and they'll harmonize with us, and they'll learn how to be happy and joyful. When that child is traumatized, however, and that they're unable to move towards the happy. If we're not careful, what ends up happening is our entire family system can be leveraged to harmonize around the fear and the sadness of the child. And often our family systems, without knowing it, start to look like the very traumatizing systems that the children were removed from.
And I think, and again, we're going to spend more time with this, but that piece, families, when they are welcoming traumatized kids into their home, they have such high expectations of wanting to share the positives of life. Mm-hmm. And then when negative Nellie or negative Ned comes in to it, there's this downward spiral that starts to occur sometime in the process. It might be months in. Some of our children are really quick, and they try to put their beliefs into the family within the first week. So we can't predict how long it's going to take, but it will happen.
Now the side effects of this, as the host family system begins to move more into the sad and scared of the child instead of the child moving to the happy, the side effect of this is people in the family system will start to look for happy or connective experiences outside the family system. Some of the symptoms I've seen are men and women, in parental roles, who are suddenly talking to someone else on the internet every night.
Yeah.
Children who they're no longer coming home. They come home long enough to change, or they don't come home long enough to change from school. Yeah. They start spending more and more time over at friends' houses, and of course the ultimate negative expression of this is things like gangs and infidelity. But what it leads to, this inability to harmonize leads to in the next generation, and even in our own, it leads to an inability to share really deep emotional connections. The family system becomes much more categorized by shallow acquaintances rather than good friends over time.
Well, and then what we also see from the traumatized kids, it appears, and this is an appearance piece, that they're able to connect with strangers. That superficially charming, engaging kind of behaviors, which then really scares the parents that they're not good enough, because now this child is connecting with a neighbor, a Sunday school teacher.
Start your downward spiral.
Yes.
Now, one of the other things, the number 5 that we see is, I think the technical term is enmeshment.
Oh yes, family systems work there.
Yeah, that's where, when those emotions transfer so quickly that the adults actually can get stuck in the emotions that the child is feeling. This is a mom who can't sleep at night because her daughter has a big math test the next day. This is the parent that compulsively needs to call up their child's friend's mother and complain that they're treating her daughter badly.
Oh, I've known of moms hunting down the girls that are treating your daughter badly and giving them a what for. We see it on the news every now and then at sports events where parents will jump in and attack the coaches and referees or other parents or players. There's this drive in them to defend their child, and this is all this is about emotional regulation. And here in this principle, our limbic brains will harmonize unless we self-regulate, unless we take care of those emotions. We could be driven into those.
One of the other signs of the enmeshment are when we give them an assignment. We would like you to do this, and they look at me and go, "Well, I'm not going to do that because she's not going to do that," or he's not going to do that, so why should I do it?
Right.
It's like, well, you should do it because it's going to be good for you.
Yeah.
But they're not going to change.
Right. Oh, yes.
it just ends up a locked sequence.
And it's about breaking that pattern, because this is a pattern. It's going to occur in families, and yet, well, the word we practically have worn out is the word intentionality. You know?
No one sets out to create these 5 things in their family system. This is what I want my family to be characterized.
That's right.
But what ends up happening is, and it's true of this principle, when this principle is you're not aware of it, and it's still working.
Right.
It can drag you down, like all the principles, when you're not aware of them,
Yeah.
and they're still back there working, and they're still impacting your family, and an awareness of them is the first step to making changes.
Just to know this principle is going to be enacted in your family one way or the other, that gives us just some hope, when you start recognizing it. So we have the 5 ways compulsively controlling the environment. It's really pretty much a flat range of affect that just to avoid emotions. Or you get number 3 is the wild swings of emotion. 4 is the one we're going to spend more time with. It's when you have somebody in the family that can't harmonize, and what happens to that family system. And then the last one is enmeshment, where you really can't separate out your emotions from another person's emotions.
I've seen families that have all 5 of these, and I've seen families that just have a few. But if we're not aware of the principle working, it's going to go in a bad direction.
Yes, it does. And I think what's nice is when you start and you have this awareness, now you can pinpoint what you need to work on.
What's always exciting about what we do is that this is fixable.
Yes.
Nothing is not.
No. Right. Thank you for watching, and we will continue with video.